Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. Today, we have with us a guest who has a great amount of common sense and is a very, very distinguished, reporter, and I would say commentator and author. And his name, I'm sure you'll recognize immediately, is Greg Kelly. He's on every night on Newsmax. He's on WABC radio. And gosh, when I was still young, he was a baby on, he was the main anchor on the local radio station, Channel 5, which is like an icon here in New York. And so he's got a heck of a background. And I will say he's very sort of unopinionated. So we might have a hard time getting an opinion out of him, but this is my job, and this is going to show how good I am. Because he's going to come across very opinionated, and it's going to be because of me. Greg, how are you?
Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you again. You know, I'm thinking about the first time I ever saw you, and you probably won't remember this, but it was in 1986 on board an aircraft carrier, the John F. Kennedy. It was sitting off of the Statue of Liberty for the 100th anniversary. And you, at that point, you remain today a superstar. And we were so thrilled to get a glimpse of U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, Rudy Giuliani, the guy we saw on TV almost every night. It was putting mobsters away, Wall Street fat cats away. And that was in 1986. I'll never forget it. And here we are.
Well, I'm going to tell you, that was the weekend that my in-laws were here. My father-in-law served on the Intrepid. So it was a remarkable weekend for him. He got to see his bunk for when he served on the Intrepid. He even showed his grandson, Andrew, and my not yet born daughter, she didn't get to see it, where he bunked. And it was also a weekend in which my wife had to have protection because the mafia threatened to kill her, which I don't often tell people. It was a short-lived threat. It was a madman who they took care of. But that's what I remember. That I was very upset that weekend because it's one thing to have it on you. It's another thing to have it on the family.
No, it's funny you should mention that because I happen to remember guys with dark glasses and things coming out of their ears around you. We kind of thought, okay, he's very important. And of course, you know, you went on. People don't recognize that at the time, some of us were disappointed that you were running for mayor because your profile was such nationally that a lot of us felt that being mayor was somehow a step below or beneath you. We wanted to see you in the United States Senate because in our view, that was closer to the presidency. This is the way some people thought. I think in retrospect, we were all wrong. It's incredible how things worked out. And a lot of lives were saved because you were mayor.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Greg. But I'd like you to tell people just a little bit of the background of your career, because they know you now on Newsmax, where you have a remarkable audience, and they know you now on WABC radio, where I listen to your show. I think you're just terrific. I don't know why anybody misses it. You also turn out to be funny and sometimes a little crotchety funny. It's really fun. I mean, I find it hilarious the way you deal with people. You never, going back to the old Bob Grant days where he would just say, "Shut up." You sort of deal with them. You can't even tell if you're upset or not. But maybe you are. It's hard to tell. You're very, very good, I have to tell you.
Well, thank you. Maybe I should let those callers speak out a little bit more because you know what? I recently called a show on Sirius XM. I was challenged to call the show by a guy named Joe Madison who was upset by something I said on television. And he goes on and on and on. He said, "Greg Kelly, you need to call me, but you don't have the courage." I say, "Okay, watch this."
Oh boy,
so I called him. And all he did was yell and scream at me and curse. So I really, but I know what it's like now to call a show and to be talked over after you've been invited on. So I do a bit less of that. I want to hear people out, even the critics.
You do that. That's right.
So, but regarding my background, the most important thing and a lot of people don't know this, but it's the most important, I guess, experience developmentally in terms of my resume was my time in the Marine Corps. Right after college, I became an officer in the United States Marine Corps. I was commissioned as second lieutenant. I had gone to officer candidate school during college. And ultimately, I became a Harrier pilot, an attack jet pilot in the Marine Corps. The Harrier is a unique jet attack aircraft that can take off and land like a helicopter. And I was active duty for 9 years, and I got
Was it
to
that long? 9 years.
9 years, which, believe it or not, was my minimum commitment. I owed them 5 years after flight school, and flight school took 4 years. But it was all a tremendous blessing. What an experience. I lived all over the country. I traveled all over the world. I met people that I never would have met had I just stayed in New York and, gone to Wall Street or whatever, most of my colleagues did from college and high school. And I am so grateful, quite frankly, to the Marine Corps, to the United States of America for that
Yes.
experience. People say, thank you for your service. I'm like, well, thank you. I just had such a great time. And oh, by the way, I was paid. You get paid for this. So I just enjoyed it. And it tested me. And I like being tested. And I'm kind of addicted to it. So yeah, being in the Marine Corps was what made me who I am in many ways, in addition to my parents and everything else and God.
Well, I should tell everyone in New York, of course, knows it, and I think most people know it. But his dad was the police commissioner of New York City twice, the longest-serving police commissioner, and many regard him, including myself, as one of the very, very best, if not the best. And he also was a teeny bit older than me and a classmate by 1 year more at Manhattan College when I went there. And that's Ray Kelly. And now you know who I'm talking about for sure. And of course, probably if you didn't go in the Marines, you probably would have gone to the police department and be police commissioner by now.
Well, that's one reason why I didn't go into the police department, because those were pretty tough footsteps, to follow.
Yeah. So you're telling me going into the Marines was easier than going? Maybe not nowadays.
Maybe not nowadays. I don't know if I would ever recommend military service right now, given the state of things. My father, by the way, was a Marine, so he did.
Yes, of course.
He did provide that example. And you and I have never talked about this, but once you were elected mayor and you were the mayor-elect, I have to commend you for this. Ordinarily, it would be a given that the incoming mayor would pick his own police commissioner. And I don't know if you had your mind made up or not, but you publicly entertained the notion of it might be Ray Kelly.
Very seriously.
Right. You interviewed him, and I think twice, and these were serious considerations, and you were asked about it, and you said, I haven't made a decision yet. Ray Kelly, you praised him, and ultimately you went another direction. But quite frankly, I think that was very respectful. I think you did the right thing, and I appreciate it very much to this day, that you treated him well and you gave him the consideration that he definitely deserved.
A different time, a different place, a different thing I had to do, it would have been him for sure. And had I ever been president, which I did run for, he doesn't know this, but he might not have taken it. He was on my list to be head of the FBI, because I thought at that point when I ran for president, he had already had the experience of being police commissioner again, with a great deal of work with the FBI, because I always say that, I saved New York. I got the lowest crime reductions any mayor ever got. They say, well, that was the really hard thing to do. At least my fans do. But I say, you got to think about this. I took over with a lot of low-hanging fruit. The city was so bad. I mean, all I had to do was put 2 cops on the street, and I brought crime down. When Ray and Mike Bloomberg took over, crime was already down 65%. It's hard to bring it down much more. There's always going to be crime. And they had remarkable declines in crime. They had the best terrorism organization in the world. They built that because we didn't have that before September 11. We had something based on the 93 attack, nothing based on no one anticipated that attack. How could this country have gotten into the position we're in now, when 3 years ago we had our best economy, we were widely respected in the world? There'd be no chance that North Korea would be flying over Japan like they did the other day. That had pretty much stopped. Trump kind of owned them. Everyone concedes Putin never would have gone into Ukraine. China, a little bit of a different story. We don't know, but we think they were somewhat more contained. And we were doing miracles. We were energy independent for the first time ever, or at least in a long time. We never thought we could be. Black and Hispanics had more jobs, more work, higher pay than ever before. Now, I won't go through where we are now, but there are a lot of people thinking that this country is making a permanent change to becoming a second-rate European, follow the leader type country. How did we get there? And we're going to talk about how we get out of it, both. What do you think the primary reason is? And now we'll take a short break. Before we get to it, I just want to remind you that, Greg, I would put Greg in that group of very, very courageous journalists who speak the truth, of which there are no more than 10, if 20% in America. I mean, most of it is now a state-controlled enterprise run by the directions of the Democrat Party and the Biden administration. I'm talking about the obvious ones, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the cable news networks minus, a few like Newsmax and most of Fox. But then there are these personalities, radio, television. They're kind of like the columnists were in the days of the print newspaper, who are the opinion makers. And Greg is one of the primary ones and one of the smartest ones, and one of those who tells you the truth. If it weren't for him and people like him, his competitors and his colleagues and his friends, we wouldn't be getting the rest of the news here. And we need support for this. With the recent ruling for the Supreme Court, it's worth mentioning that these things I'm talking about the case that reaffirmed life. We got to remind ourselves that we need support. We need supporters. We need companies like Patriot Mobile, who are constitutional conservatives. They fiercely believe and protect the life of the unborn, and they have a similar fierce protection for the Bill of Rights, which is what makes us Americans, as Abraham Lincoln told us. It's the only Christian conservative mobile phone company in the country, or anywhere as far as I know. And it gives you the same very, very good service as all the rest of the companies, except your money goes to the causes that you believe in to help save our form of government and our way of life. You get the same great service, and you're doing something to save your country. That's at patriotmobile.com/Rudy. patriotmobile.com/Rudy. Use the code Rudy and you get free activation. If you're a veteran or a first responder, you're going to get extra benefits, as you should. So come join our movement and go to patriot.com/Rudy. That's patriot.com/Rudy, or call 972-PATRIOT. Now let's get back to our interview with Greg Kelly.
Primary reason is Barack Obama. Barack Obama, who retains a great deal of power, and I do believe set about to dismantle what makes this country great. That was in his head. It was in his heart. He conned a lot of people, including me. I voted for Barack Obama in 2008. And by the way, here's why. I like Sarah Palin very much as a person. I did not think that she should be one heartbeat away from the presidency, especially given John McCain, his advanced age, and his health. When he made that move, I said, there goes the presidency for John McCain. I am a different person now than I was in 2008. But, he looked good. He sounded good, had some credentials that, quite frankly, lots of people have. I bet half the people who worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office under you had Harvard law degrees. But we were all told to be extraordinarily impressed by that. He becomes president, and he starts to do what we all thought he wouldn't do, which was play the race card. He didn't do that essentially during the election because he didn't have to. They did it for him. But a lot of us thought this is a guy who's going to take on race in a new and interesting way that, quite frankly, white people can't. And he went to that church group in Chicago and talked about absentee Black fathers. Everybody knows it's a problem, but it's very difficult, or at the time it was very difficult and awkward for leaders who are not Black to talk about that. He did. And let's face it, there are huge, huge problems in portions of the African American community that remain unaddressed and not even discussed. When he becomes president, he starts to lose critical power, critical popularity actually among blacks. He goes from like 93% to 91%, then down to 89%. And he presses a panic button. His staff does as well. We have to go all in on woke racial politics because of the erosion of support. A lot of people don't know this, but we have it documented in my book that comes out in January.
Oh yes, give us the name of the book, and we're going to put up a cover of it right now.
Well, the book is called Justice for All: Why the Woke Left is Wrong About Law Enforcement. And I have not yet seen a book that addresses, what has happened to this country since George Floyd, the complete overreaction and exploitation of that one event. But it was very strategic. The people behind it, the exploitation phase, they know exactly what they're doing. And now we're all living with the aftermath. And there may be some regret in Democrat circles because it appears as though they've dismantled society. And there are some Democrats who are waking up to this, who appreciate law and order, who want to think that the police are a legitimate presence, at least, in our society. So we go through the history of what happened both before and after George Floyd. And we raise some critical issues that I don't think anyone's touched on. I will tell you this, I'm not quite done with the book. It is a work in progress. I got a deadline next week. So it's interesting, and we're updating it.
You're making some changes in it up to the last minute.
Oh, sure. Why not? Things happen all the time, and but there are a lot of things that I want to say, and it's hard to say, even with a 2-hour radio show and a TV show. I think the book is going to move the needle on the conversation about law enforcement and race in America. I hope it
needs to be, and it needs to be. So Obama really probably meant a lot more than we realized when he said he was going to make fundamental change, fundamental revision in our government. Presidents say that a lot when they get elected. And when we look at the presidents elected in the 20th century, they all made changes and differences, Roosevelt and Reagan probably being the two biggest changes. But we assume that they mean within the confines of the Constitution, a capitalist economy, a free economy, mostly. We had no idea, I think, that this was a kind of a Marxist trained guy. He was trained by Saul Alinsky, and he really had in mind a complete change of our form of government and our values and our economic system. And he didn't get a lot of it done. He started it. But I think that's what you mean by it started with him.
In terms of governmental, sure. I mean, the man is a socialist. And then more to, emotionalizing issues of crime, law and order, and race. You may remember when Professor Gates was arrested in his own house. Sure. This is actually a very big moment in American history that I don't think has received its proper due because a lot of things change. So Professor Gates is an African-American professor at Harvard who goes away on vacation, comes back. He's locked out of his house. He forgot his keys. A neighbor sees him going in a window, and she thinks, understandably, that maybe somebody's robbing that house. So she calls the Cambridge police, dials 911. They come, and there's an altercation between Gates and a police officer. Words are exchanged, and everybody apparently understands that Gates can be a bit of a hothead and can escalate when things shouldn't be escalated. But he was arrested, brought downtown. Once they established he was the owner and he calmed down, should that have happened? Probably not. But did it require presidential attention? No. But President Obama went out of his way to call the Cambridge Police Department stupid. He did that on national television before he had all the facts. And this was part of a strategy that was very much in line with Black Lives Matter, which had not yet formally been established, but all of the players were kind of coalescing around the issue. And it set race relations back. And it's very interesting that Obama, in his memoir, complains that everybody in the White House had to be nice to the white cop. You'll remember they invited both participants to the beer summit, Professor Gates and the police officer. This is an interesting moment that, and it gets worse. Trayvon Martin happens a couple of years later, and that's where Black Lives is formally established.
Yep.
It's all to help Barack Obama. It's all to help the left. And then actually, there's something, you say this has always been happening, or I think you said that a moment ago. There's been mission creep for a long time from the United States government. All of this big swamp apparatus was not envisioned by our founding fathers. You hear this all the time. The men and women of the Treasury Department, the men and women of the Pentagon, the men and women of the FBI, these precious men and women, as if our political leaders, our representatives are there to serve the men and women of the swamp rather than those men and women serving our elected leaders.
That's an excellent point, Greg. That's an excellent point. It's a complete, that is what I mean by he intended a change in the fundamental form of our government. I mean, the fundamental form of our government it's a government of the people, not just a slogan, a reality of law. Now it's a government of the bureaucrats, but run by the bureaucrats, possibly more important than the elected officials in some ways. Time to take a short break for our interview with Greg Kelly. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. Welcome back to our interview with the wonderful Greg Kelly.
They've been shrouded in this righteousness, and you have a situation, I've seen this a lot, where, and you probably have too, a political leader, a politically appointed leader becomes what we call a captive of the staff. A great example of this, I don't know if you're friends with him, but Chris.
Doesn't matter. Tell us who.
Chris Christie. Now, Chris Christie becomes a U.S. attorney in New Jersey. Unlike you, who had ample law enforcement experience and worked at the Justice Department at a very high level, he was just some guy who gave money to George W. Bush. And he becomes a mouthpiece and a defender of his attorneys. He does not know any better. They own him. He can't lead. And government is full of people like this. They're intimidated by the agencies they lead, the staff they lead. And we got to change that.
So, the interesting thing, Greg, is he's the one who recommended Wray as the head of the FBI. And can you think of a better example of someone led by his bureaucracy than Director Wray?
Chris Christie had his guy. There were other people who thought Ray Kelly would have been a better FBI director under Trump. And those phone calls were made. In fact, Donald Trump called my father and said, Ray, would you be interested? Because I think you'd be great. And they had some preliminary discussions, but it didn't go anywhere because I believe Christie was closer. He had, he had a favor coming to him. Chris Christie, people forget he did endorse Donald Trump as soon as he dropped out of
the president turned him down, and President turned him down for Attorney General because of Bridgegate. The president could not overcome the fact that he thought Bridgegate would be a hindrance to his confirmation.
I think that was a pretty good call on Trump's part. And also, he turned him down for vice president.
I didn't agree with it completely. I was 50-50 on it, but that was the president's, in fact, I recommended Chris, which now in retrospect I would take back, but I did. But I think the president's reservation about Chris, and Chris would never accept it. Really, look, I knew that I shouldn't be attorney general. The president wanted me to be attorney general. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that I could have been the attorney general. I was his first choice. I turned it down because I would have had clearly the problem that Sessions had magnified by 10. I mean, if there was anybody that was conflicted in being the chief law enforcement officer in a Trump administration, it was the guy who was with him for 6 straight months, his friend of 31 years, who had been maybe his number 1, number 2, number 3 surrogate during the campaign. I literally spent the last 4 months of the 2016 campaign in the airplane with him.
It goes back to what we were talking about. You know, the institution, they don't submit to their political overseers, and you know that sounds very like a good thing. You should not submit to your political overseers. Well, this is a democracy. This is supposed to be about the people. We elected Trump. Trump gets to pick somebody he knows, likes, and trusts to run an agency. That agency is supposed to report to, you know, if you're a civilian, if you've never worked in government, if you don't, just imagine, and this is a human trait, I would say, you're working in a company and there's a new boss or there's a new management team, you know, there's drama, you know, well, we've always done it this way. We're going to continue to do it this way. And people may leak to the newspaper and, you know, it happens in life, unfortunately, but the stakes are so much greater, and it's not supposed to happen in government, according to the Constitution.
Well, how much of a reformation, or maybe better put it this way, how far gone is the Justice Department and the FBI?
I think the FBI is so fundamentally damaged and tarnished that it must be rebranded, number one.
Yeah.
A top to bottom overhaul. And just even think of the name, FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now, those are things that people don't like. They don't like bureaus. they don't like bureaucrats. A federal bureaucracy involved in law enforcement. I do think it should be fast, nimbler, and also I think they have to do a better job communicating what it is they really do. You know, they are the victim somewhat of high expectations. You know, thanks in part to J. Edgar Hoover, who created this national police force and a mythology to some degree. People still believe in that mythology, that they are a national police force. Wherein my understanding of it would be more appropriate to describe them as the investigative arm of the U.S. attorneys.
Yeah, and I mean, like, for example, so a U.S. attorney would have investigating his cases or her cases, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the Treasury Department, the Internal Revenue Service, who now going to get 87,000 more agents.
Every time we have a school shooting, we hear that the FBI, you know, they were on some list, or the FBI interviewed them 2 years ago or 6 months ago. It happens all the time throughout the FBI's history, by the way. You know, famously, it's been forgotten, but Lee Harvey Oswald was on the to-do list of a FBI agent in Dallas. He was going to get around to seeing him at some point the week after the assassination. He had an appointment with him the following Monday. This guy had been hanging around Dallas, who was just returned from Russia, dishonorably discharged from the Marine Corps. This was a problem guy, okay? He was writing crazy letters all over the place. The FBI was aware of him, but they probably didn't have the manpower. In fact, Agent Hosty is the one who said that, you know, his caseload was such that he could not get to it. And then, well, we know the results. I do believe, by the way, I'm a bit of a assassination buff, that Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy by himself. A lot of people don't agree with me about that. That's another conversation, but I do believe that.
Here's something that bothers me, and I want to know if it bothers you. I know everyone is very concerned that Kamala Harris cannot replace Biden. She isn't capable of being president. Yes or no? I don't think you're allowed to consider that when you have a president that is now, in my view, clearly falls within the 25th Amendment, is incapable of carrying out the duties of the office of the President of the United States. He's right in foursquare in the middle of that. And I'm really, really worried about the precedent that people in the cabinet can play games with this. And if you're with Biden every day, you got to know that his brain doesn't work, at least not all the time. You don't go looking for a dead woman if your brain is working. And you don't turn around and shake hands with the air. You can't remember the Pledge of Allegiance, and you can't. We know who remembers that. I have elderly relatives. I go to nursing homes. I have one that I take care of, and I go to the nursing home. And there are people in better shape in that nursing home than our president. So why is the Democratic Party so anti-American and pro-Democratic Party that it will not raise the issue that our president is clearly mentally incapable? Or am I going too far?
No, you're not going too far at all. I wonder about that myself. Really, what is the motivation and the media? And look, I have not gotten my hands around that. What is the motive? There are so many people. Look, this is for reporters. I mean, this is just a great story, if nothing else. Why are you afraid of it? But the people understand. The American people know what's going on. Although, I'll say this: there are two people that this is ultimately will make the decision. Barack Obama and Susan Rice, both of whom I do believe are essentially running the country. My prediction is it will not come to the 25th Amendment. It will come to a Joe Biden resignation.
Yes.
Joe will resign for a number of reasons. It's probably the right thing to do given his condition. And if he should be stubborn about it or obstinate or want to stay in office, one of the reasons he is where he is because, well, he's compromised. You know things about Joe Biden because of the laptop, because of a lot of things. I know things about Joe Biden. If we know those things, I do believe the Justice Department at least has access to it.
Of course.
Barack Obama, they could, even if they don't have it right in front of them, they could pull the trigger on that stuff like that. They could. So I do think he is a man who has political masters. He knows he's vulnerable. He has to do what they say. He was never this far left before. I think he's doing it in part to protect Hunter, to protect himself. And also, finally, I think he's being manipulated a little bit. I know what
I do agree with that. Go on with that. That's well,
there's a reason why malicious telemarketers do best with the elderly. They call them up and they can make them believe just about anything, and they'll sign up for anything. Not all elderly, but a lot, especially Joe. I think he's being manipulated by his staff. I mean, Joe Biden can't possibly think this about the world unless he's being lied to, or he's lying himself. There's a combination of all of it, but for him to go to Georgia and say what they're trying to do in Georgia is worse than Jim Crow. The voter law there says Democrat Party or party officials should not be handing out food and drink to people online. And that's not a problem. you can't that makes sense. And for him to say they're depriving people of food and water, I mean, somebody misrepresented that to him. I don't think he sat down and read the bill. So I think a lot of issues are being misrepresented in his fragile state. And keep in mind, he had no integrity to begin with, none, and very little intelligence as well. So that's a unique cocktail there. And but this time next year, I don't think he'll be president. And I think you're right. Also, you can't worry about Kamala Harris, even though she'll be terrible. If I can go one step further, they're trying to extract, I believe, and I have heard this from some well-placed sources, they want to extract the Biden people, because the Biden people do not like Kamala Harris. They will extract a promise from her that she will not run for president. She'll be president. She'll serve out the remainder of the term, but she will not run for president. She can't do two things at once. She can't be president, and we know she's terrible at running for president. You know what I mean? So she can only be terrible at one thing at a time, and she'll be a terrible president, most likely. And I think that's how it's going to go down.
Yeah. And if you wait until after January 1st, God forbid if she should run, and God forbid if she should win, she'd only have one term. Whereas if she gets it now, she'd have the possibility of 2 terms in the White House. So you do make and also you make a pretty good argument for your point. She's taken over kind of at the end, and therefore she's got to pay attention to be the caretaker, particularly at a country that we would say at that point is in turmoil, right? Of course, that's going to be her. Can she be talked into that? But she doesn't have much of an option if the party and Barack Obama. It is my understanding that she was the choice of Soros, for sure. Soros' son gave her a massive contribution for her presidential campaign, and he endorsed her formally, and that she was Biden's secret, not Biden, Obama's secret choice at the beginning. He never realized until she ran how bad a candidate she was. He was kind of taken with her. You remember way back during the Obama administration, there was a story about the first lady being kind of jealous of her because Obama spent a little time with her, and I think he didn't know that much about her. And she came into the presidential race pretty heavily touted. Do you remember? And then she had that first good debate, one good debate, and bam.
Maybe some issues there. Maybe some who knows what issues. I've heard all kinds of things because very uneven performance. I too was somewhat impressed with her rollout when she announced for president. It was actually well done, but no, not anymore. And I think Obama's probably surprised as well. He said, we got a good looking attorney general here. He had to apologize for that. He had to apologize. You can't say that. You can't say that, especially him. Mr. Mayor, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Greg. I'm looking forward to listening to you on your radio show on WABCradio.com. And, of course, on every night, 10
p.m. Eastern time.
On Newsmax, best show on. His radio show is the second best, but almost the best, because I come right after him. Now, I enjoy listening to him tremendously.
Folks can pre-order my book on Amazon.com. Justice for All by Greg Kelly, wherever books are sold. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All the best.
Well, I'm sure you found that interview as intriguing and interesting as I did, and as unsatisfying in the sense that we could have gone on for hours and hours more. His views on the world are essentially, I think you would say conservative, but they are broad enough so that at times he has a different way of looking at things or an observation that he has that others don't have. He's a unique talent in that sense. God bless you. Thank you, and God bless America.